Let me reconvene the subcommittee. Thank you very much. Appreciate your patience. We'll be being yanked, well, maybe right now just me will be being yanked out of here every hour or so, but I appreciate your indulgence. Let me begin with our first panelist, Dale Penny, President and CEO, Student Conservation Association, and ask for your comments and appreciate you being here. And I know you have a guest with you that you would want to have introduced.
I do.
Introduce himself, or you can introduce him, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate very much being able to speak with you today and to share this with the colleagues on the panel, particularly Sally Prouty, who is president of the core network with which SCA does a lot of work. My name is Dale Penny. I'm president of the Student Conservation Association, or SCA, and it's a nationwide nonprofit organization that since 1957 has engaged more than 50,000 diverse college and high school students in hands-on conservation service on America's public lands. And I applaud the committee for recognizing both potential and the need for an expanded public land service corps, and for hearing testimony on what SCA believes is a particularly timely and effective legislative initiative. This act will benefit the nation in three profound ways: by preserving our natural, cultural, and historical heritage, by providing jobs and job training for thousands of deserving young people, and by helping a new generation develop the skills and commitment to become tomorrow's conservation and environmental leaders. I should note that SCA was originally modeled after the old Civilian Conservation Corps. It was founded by a young woman in college in the 1950s who saw young volunteers as a solution to helping the overburdened national parks. And she wrote a senior thesis on a proposed student conservation corps. And the first corps members reported to service at Grand Teton and Olympic National Parks in 1957. And today, SCA is America's leading national conservation service corps, annually engaging thousands of young adults and teens in parks, sanctuaries, and urban communities in all 50 states. This year alone, SCA members will render more than 2 million hours of service to their nation and their communities. Mr. Chairman, the impact that these young people have on the land is profound and immediate, but their influence extends well beyond the here and now. The evidence that conservation service does indeed produce ardent stewards and citizens is convincing. A few facts. SCA's alumni surveys reveal that some 60% of our members move into conservation-related professions and volunteer in conservation endeavors in their home communities. A landmark study of SCA and other outdoor programs by Dr. Stephen Kellert at Yale showed that 78% of participants declared themselves more environmentally aware, responsible, and active as a result of their experience. And a review of the workforce at the Departments of Interior, Agriculture, and others throughout the public and private sectors reveals that thousands of SCA alumni are employed as rangers, scientists, environmental educators, and more. In fact, the National Park Service alone has estimated that as many as 12% of its uniformed employees launch their careers through SCA internships. No one in this room needs to be reminded that our economy and our environment are in crisis, and today's generation knows unless we are able to address these issues, and soon, they will inherit a host of problems that grow more acute by the day. But I want to assure you that there is also ample reason for hope. Growing numbers of young people across the nation are eager and prepared to respond to a renewed call to service. Applications to SCA are now at all-time highs, more than 40% ahead of this point last year. And many other conservation corps and service organizations are experiencing similar growth and surges. An expanded Public Land Service Corps, along with President Obama's GIVE Act and the bipartisan Kennedy-Hatch Serve America Act, when fully funded, have the potential to chart a new era of citizen service at a time when our country and our people need it the most. I know this bill is focused on federal public lands. However, to ensure nature's wonders and opportunities are available to all populations and to bring a more inclusive conservation community, SCA has for many decades focused on engaging underserved urban populations, in cooperation with city authorities. We introduce African American, Latino, Asian American, and other people, young people, to their hometown parks and encourage them to explore their own unique connections with nature. We furnish them stipends to make our programs more accessible and provide innovative routes to their education, and to provide them tangible job skills that lead to promising, productive careers. I encourage this committee to join SCA, other conservation corps, and other youth service programs in building bridges between local communities and federal lands. As a proven partner of the bureaus within Interior, Agriculture, and Commerce and other federal departments, SCA is ready to help fulfill the objectives of this legislation by engaging more young people in conservation service, reaching out to diverse populations, and providing tens of thousands of emerging citizens with a direct pipeline to green jobs and lifelong stewardship. I have a number of specific comments to highlight on key components of this legislation, which I will submit in my written testimony. And I wish now to share my time with Marcus Hendricks, who is a recent SCA member and who's a fine example of the thousands of young men and women who will benefit from this bill. We're very proud of what Marcus has done and what he's going to do with his life, and I'd like for you to meet Marcus right now.
Welcome, Mr. Hendricks, and look forward to your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today, and thank you, ma'am, as well. My name is Marcus Hendricks, and I am a sophomore studying mechanical engineering at the George Washington University. I grew up in the DC area, and I went to high school at the School Without Walls. I started working with the SCA as a sophomore in high school in order to gain the community service hours that I needed for graduation. I've since accumulated over 400 hours and strongly believe that community service helped me to get into GW. I've now worked on 3 crews as well as participated in the Conservation Leadership Corps with the SCA. And some of the happiest moments of my life took place on those crews, not only because of the people that I was working with, but also because of the natural environment that I was working in that allowed me to take my mind off of stressful things such as homework. In school, students have the opportunity to enhance their classroom learning with outdoor experiences so that they can develop a personal attachment to what is learned in the textbook or in educational videos. When I proposed going to a local national park to my senior class for a field trip, they said it would be boring, they didn't want to get dirty, and they were afraid of bugs. I believe they missed a valuable opportunity to experience a sense of connection that comes with exploring the outdoors or taking in the scenery on a hike that one of my crews worked on the trails. There's a real potential to connect students with a classroom learning in fields such as geography and biology. Instead of looking at illustrations of tributaries and ecosystems, it's a lot more thrilling to be a part of an ecosystem if you're not too careful in a natural park. If I had my way, this committee would support any program that would expand opportunities for young people to have meaningful experiences and connections with the parks and public lands that I had with SCA. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have for me.
Thank you. Let me now ask Ms. Sally Prouty, President and CEO of the Core Network, and also you are accompanied by a guest that
I am. Thank you.
will introduce. Thank you very much. Look forward to your comments.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here, and we appreciate you, Chairman Grijalva, and the members of the committee for the tremendous work. We're delighted with the bill that's before us today. My name is Sally Prouty, and I'm President and CEO of the Core Network. And it is my privilege to speak strongly in support of this Public Land Service Corps Act. I'm here on behalf of the Core Network and the 136 service and conservation corps it represents, and the 26,000 young people enrolled in those corps. And I wanted to note that over half of the young people enrolled in the corps that we represent enter the Corps without a high school diploma or GED. So there's a very wide range of young people that we represent. I have submitted comments, but in the brief time I have this afternoon, I'd like to emphasize why this bill is so important and certainly important to the world of corps that we represent. And first of all, it will bring much-needed resources to the tremendous backlog projects that you all know about. It will increase utilization of service and service learning as strategies for accomplishing work on public lands. It will also introduce more and more diverse young people to America's public lands, instilling in them an appreciation for nature, an enjoyment of healthy recreation, and a sense of stewardship for our natural resources and the environment. In addition, by expanding the non-competitive hiring status of public lands corps members, it will bring youth and diversity to the land management agency workforce and provide additional opportunities for young people, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, to pursue good careers in land and natural resource management. It will raise the profile of the Public Land Service Corps within the relevant agencies and establish coordinators, making it easier for corps and other youth service organizations to participate. And it will help bring corps a proven youth development strategy to scale. Today's corps are a proven strategy for giving young men and women, many of whom are economically or otherwise disadvantaged and out of work, out of school, the chance to have a positive impact on their own lives and the communities and the environment. And I would note that we know from random assignment evaluation that young people enrolled in corps have substantial earnings and employment gains, that risk behaviors decrease, and we know that findings are most significant for young African American men. Very interesting that I'm sitting here with you today. Of the 26,000 corps members currently enrolled, 55% have no high school diploma, 64% report family income below the federal poverty level, 30% have had previous court involvement, and at least 10% have been in foster care. Contemporary corps provide thousands of 16 to 25-year-olds the opportunity to earn a second chance in life through hard work and service to their communities. The most important part of my being here is that I am seated with James Childress, and it's my pleasure to have you meet him as a representative of the 26,000 young people that we represent. James.
Welcome, Mr. Childress. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. First, I would like to thank you for inviting me and allowing me to be here with you today. My name is James Childress, and I am a Corps member with the Citizens Conservation Corps of West Virginia. Prior to coming to the Corps, I was in the wrong crowd. Smoking, drinking, staying out late, and sometimes not even coming home had me going down a dark path fast. I found myself at times not wanting to get up in the morning. My home life was stressful. My parents were going through a divorce. My two younger brothers needed somebody to look to, and I was not there. I had just graduated from high school in Beckley, and I needed to figure out what was I going to do next. A friend of mine from a local church, knowing my situation and wanted to help me avoid a total disaster, suggested I should apply for a position with the Corps. I had thought about the military, but I was not ready to take that step yet, and I felt I was needed at home. I joined the Corps in June of 2007, and little did I know what time and impact it would have on my way of thinking about my future. I began with the CCCWV working in the New River Gorge National Park, working in teams of 4 and sometimes 5 under the direction of a crew leader. We planted trees, maintained many trails, restored historical buildings, and built many bridges. The following year, I was placed on a spray crew. Being on this crew was a new experience for me, but I learned a lot, like about invasive plant and species and the damage they can cause to native species and their habitats. I also learned about pesticides and how to apply them safely. While I was in high school, it became clear that I did not do my best in a traditional classroom setting, but I was a sight learner, and I learned best by having people show me. Because everything I do at the CCCWV involves hands-on or sight learning, and so far I've been able to excel. Prior to joining the CCCWV, I spent little time outdoors. Now I love nature, and by being in this organization, I was able to see places that many people my age are not able to see today. And it's an importance to me, and I know how to take care of it. Before joining the Corps, I only knew the only kind of power tool I've ever used was a push mower in my front and backyard. I am now certified to use a chainsaw, pesticide sprayer, a zero-turn commercial-grade lawnmower, and other tools. These certifications and all of this experience will make me an attractive future to future employers. I have also developed a number of skills that will help me in the workforce, such as teamwork, problem-solving, personal responsibility, and pride in workmanship. Perhaps the most importantly, I've learned a lot more about myself, is what I like and what I want to do and what I can achieve if I focus and push myself to do it. I am still currently working for the CCCWV, and through my Corps service, I have successfully earned an AmeriCorps Education Award to help me pay for higher education, and in the future, I hope to use that award to study for mechanical engineering. I have benefited so much from my experience in working on the public land Corps projects because I was challenged and exposed to all kinds of things. And because of this experience, I have now a greater respect for the natural beauty in or public lands, which will make me a better steward of those lands. I hope that this bill passes so more young people like me can have the same opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it seems that based on the experience that the young people that work in this end up going into mechanical engineering after. Let me now ask Ms. Sally Jewell, President and CEO, Recreation Equipment Incorporated, National Parks Conservation Association. Thank you for being here and looking forward to your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am a mechanical engineer, and I'm delighted that Marcus and James have picked that as a profession. It's a great degree. I am here representing the 340,000 members of the National Parks Conservation Association. But in my day job as CEO of REI, we sell a lot of outdoor equipment to people who love and enjoy a healthy environment for renewal and recreation. So this is tremendously important to us. I will also say that at REI we work with a lot of nonprofit organizations like the Student Conservation Association and many members of the core network in states across this country to do service on public lands. Last year, about 1.5 million hours of service on public lands. So these organizations, the young people represented up here, are represented by organizations like them across this country, and the amount of work that they do is nothing short of amazing. You can go back to our wonderful national park network from Mount Rainier National Park in my neck of the woods to Grand Canyon to Shenandoah and see the work that was done by young people in the 30s. You can see it in places like Moran State Park near me in the San Juan Islands, or even Sherman Rock, which is a climbing rock built by the Civilian Conservation Corps in local city park very close to my house in Seattle. These kinds of projects connect people for life to the places. James and I were talking a minute ago, and I saw Marcus a week and a half ago as we were working on the future of the national parks. And they both talk about that bridge they built being their bridge and the connection that you get to that place that you work on. Dan Evans, probably the most famous politician ever. Sorry, Jay, you're not there yet, but you will be. From the state of Washington, 3-term governor, and replaced Scoop Jackson as senator, told me not too long ago that when he drove along I-90 in what we call the Mountains to Sound Greenway, he always looked for his tree. And I said, your tree? And he said, yes, I planted a tree as a Boy Scout when I was 10 years old, and that tree is now 73 years old. So stories like that give people a connection to place, and I so appreciate, Chairman Grijalva, you and Chairman Rahal for introducing this bill and making public lands a part of the Service Corps acts that are currently going through or have just passed Congress. My son, Peter, worked for 3 years as a volunteer climbing ranger alongside Mike Gauthier, former climbing ranger, who's actually sitting in the corner of the room over there. Mike's on the Benvenuto Fellowship for 2 years here. His work in Mount Rainier National Park, engaging young volunteers, changes lives, and the budget and the support for those kinds of programs do make an enormous difference. So we're in an interesting time right now with a tough economy, with increasing levels of unemployment and underemployment, both young people and older Americans. We have a dearth of diversity on our public lands. Our public lands are not represented by the people who represent this country. And we have parks, public lands, and open spaces that are desperately in need of help. And so this bill, I think, represents a trifecta of opportunity to solve this. It engages the incredible diversity of this nation by making a connection to public lands. It provides opportunities for employment when we really need them, not only for young people, but also for older Americans who have a tremendous amount of skill and labor and love of this land to give back. And it brings our national parks and our public lands back with some chronically needed tender loving care. They are, in fact, falling apart. And as we prepare for the centennial of our national parks in 2016, there's nothing, I think, that could be more impactful than putting young people alongside older people to work on these important places to really start this second century of the National Park Service and the time when our public lands are so important on the radar for all Americans. So I appreciate very much the tremendous effort you've made in putting this bill forward, and give it my wholehearted support and look forward to helping you get it passed. Thank you.
Mr. John Reynolds, Coalition of National Park Service Retirees, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill Wade sends his personal regards. Thank you for holding this hearing and for inviting the Coalition of National Park Service Retirees to testify. My name is John Reynolds. I'm a landscape architect. I am a member of the Coalition, having served nearly 40 years with the National Park Service, including in positions as Park Superintendent, Regional Director, and Deputy Director. Since retirement, I have served on the boards of directors of the Student Conservation Association and Yosemite National Institutes, both serving young people in parks and other public lands. I currently am retained by the Student Conservation Association as an advisor. Dale's my boss. I am also, through the National Parks Conservation Association, a contract advisor to the Connecting People and Parks Committee of the National Parks Second Century Commission. Sally is my boss.
So good.
Mr. Chairman, I will summarize my testimony and have submitted the full testimony for the record. Today you have brought before us an opportunity to combine some of the very best of American ideals into one very important act, an act that will benefit the nation's treasured lands and which will inspire and empower people who have inherited these lands as either their birthright or as a result of choosing citizenship in this nation. The National Park Service, from its very beginning in 1916, has benefited greatly from service by individuals to their nation. The service has also seen itself from that time beginning as important in the education of the American people. This act will serve to make the traditions of the services past even more relevant to the needs of today and the future. Some have called the national parks the best idea America ever had, because of our nation's democratic impulse to save these parks for all of us, regardless of whom we are or where we are from. Today, the need to provide opportunity to connect Americans in the places they live to the richness of our national parks, public lands, and cultural heritage is ever more evident. This act will be a permanent, beneficial bridge between Americans and their nation. This bill is thoughtfully crafted. In my written testimony, I list many provisions that the Coalition wants especially to support, but which I will not now enumerate. The Coalition wishes by that testimony to help ensure that these provisions are retained when this bill is enacted into law. The Coalition requests that the committee entertain the following possible additional amendments. 1, agency needs for multilingual frontline assistance and qualified assistance in classrooms or outdoor learning programs be specifically included. 2, specific authorization for operation of residential centers by qualified, experienced nonprofit organizations. 3, addition of agency retirees to the mentoring program. 4, provision made for certain older Americans to serve as well as youth. And 5th, experience over the last several years in obtaining approval of cooperative agreements in many agencies has been very discouraging to nonprofit partners with long, some over 50 years, and productive relationships with agencies. The enormous time and effort spent with lawyers and contracting officers has meant large outlays of money and time by nonprofit personnel. Agencies have had to waste precious funds and time detracting from their core missions. This debilitating and detrimental condition still exists. It has the potential to create difficulties in implementation of this act. Section 206 could be greatly strengthened and efficient implementation materially improved by adding the following language. The Secretary is authorized to enter into cooperative agreements non-competitively with the Student Conservation Association, Conservation Corps, or any other qualified nonprofit organization to perform any authorized function or purpose of the Department and its bureaus if the agreement will, 1, serve a mutual interest of the parties to the agreement in carrying out the programs administered by the Department, and 2, all parties contribute resources to the accomplishment of these programs. Both fairness and efficiency can and need be achieved. The Coalition is deeply appreciative of the work of the committee and its staff in preparing this bill. The benefits which will accrue To members of the Corps, to the national parks, other public lands, and to the nation itself, though difficult to quantify, are truly important to our entire society. This bill positively affects the future of our youth and may well contribute to the future of their families. In so doing, it will be the nation, our society, and our environment which will benefit from the investments made in the men and women who will have the opportunity of their lifetime. In summary, lives will be more joyful and productive, character will be honed, America will benefit. The testimony of Marcus and James is the most crucial of all. It is for their future and the future of their and future generations that this bill is for. The Coalition of National Park Service Retirees is honored to have been asked to testify today, stands ready to assist, and looks forward to the enactment of this bill. The Coalition strongly and enthusiastically supports it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank all of you for your comments. And let me begin with you, if I may, Mr. Reynolds. You, among the amendments that the coalition suggested, is the one to make it possible for older Americans as well as youth to serve in the Public Lands Service Corps. We accomplished that how? Would you suggest that we keep any mention of target age out of the legislation, or continue to have that target age of 16 to 25 as still part of the legislation?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we keep the target age, but in addition, add opportunities for older Americans who had never had the opportunity to go on to school, to be able to qualify under certain circumstances, and we'd be more than willing to help work on trying to define what that means.
Okay, thank you, and we'll look forward to that discussion. The intent is that target age, but I think your point is well taken about the mentoring and the possibility of some cross-generational understanding that we need very desperately as well. And so your point is well taken, and I look forward to discussing that point with you.
Thank you.
I know, Ms. Jewell, you have to get going to catch
I'm okay
up.
for now.
Okay. I was going to ask Mr. Childress a question, if I may. Thank you for your comments and sharing your experiences with us. Chairman of the full committee, Mr. Ray Hall, is unable to be here. He wanted to make sure that I extended his welcome to you. Beckley is his hometown also, and he asked me to extend his best wishes. And the New River Gorge National Park is also very near and dear to the chairman. He welcomes you, and it's good. He said it's good to have a hometown boy in the house, so he's very happy. You mentioned your two brothers, as part of the discussion. I think do you think with your siblings? And I'm going to ask the same question to all of you. Watching you going through this program and the experience that you've gone through with the Corps, what effect has it had on them?
The effect it has on them is, back then they looked at me as somebody to look up to during our hard time, and now that I've been to the Corps, they're looking at me now like, hey, I can actually look up to him and do something with my life instead of being here like many other children. But I think through this Corps, it's going to help my two brothers learn that there is more out there than just sitting inside playing video games all day, which, I mean, is not bad, but sometimes sometimes we have to go outside and do stuff and learn to work and learn responsibility and put with teamwork. So I think by me doing this is showing them that there's something outside of just sitting in the house all day.
Do you see yourself after you complete your college education, do you see yourself pursuing a career in the National Park Service, public land area?
After I finish, I want to attend the military, but outside of that, I want to still help outside National Park and everything, and help pursue in the Public Lands Corps if that's able to me to be able to help them.
Thank you very much. I understand that many Corps members do not work full-time because they can't afford to. or prefer not to go too far from home. But this is one of the critical populations that we hope to capture with this legislation, as you know. Do you have any concerns that the preferential hiring language requiring 960 hours of service might be a disincentive to some members that would want to participate? And if so, do you have any suggestions about how to deal with that concern?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is a concern for us, and we do have, I would say that all of our corps are full-time, but they're for varying lengths of time. So some are short number of weeks or months, so that getting to the 960 hours is not possible for them. And I would really appreciate the opportunity for us to work with you to think about whether there is a tiered opportunity within the non-competitive hire, which for lesser number of hours, many of our young people would be qualified for entry-level jobs, but would not be ready for more advanced positions with federal agencies. So we would appreciate the chance to work with you on that.
Okay, just a quick follow-up. In your testimony, you list a very impressive list of achievement of the Service Corps, and just for the sake of my understanding, do you see? What do you think of the program? Is it a land management program? Is it a human resource development program? Is it an intervention program for at-risk kids? Or I mention that because it's rare to have something as successful having all those ingredients. If you were to classify it or put a definition on it, what would it be?
Well, it would be all of the above. And it's interesting, we have wonderful corps that have college students, college graduates, SEA, and a number of others. We also have corps that are fully concentrated on young people who are not making it in their community. We have corps that concentrate on young people who have been formerly incarcerated and court involved. So we have two areas in which we feel strongly about evaluation, and one is in member development, and it's member development based on the point of entry, and the other is impact in the community and the environment. We see corps as unique to the communities in which they live and breathe. They've grown up in communities. They are different, and they set their own standards for enrollment. We see benefit across the board, and most dramatic benefit in terms of education and workforce development is for those who come in at a much lower level.
Thank you. And let me thank you for your comments today, and also Mr. Hendricks said let me follow up and thank you as well for being here and sharing your experiences with us. And let me follow up on the question that I asked Mr. Childress. When you're done with the career goal that you have to finish college, or do you see Park Service, Public Land Service as potentially a career down the road?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I initially intend to be a medical doctor once I graduate, and also have my mechanical engineering degree to be a source of education where I can do some research in space propulsion, since that's another big interest of mine. However, I don't think that I can be a medical doctor
However,
and an engineer forever. And it would be nice to be able to find a quiet job working in a national or state park as I get to my gray years. And to also answer your earlier question of my siblings being inspired by the work I do, my sister is interested in working with the SEA. It's going to be hard convincing her that she can work with the SEA and have a fun summer instead of doing something else and earning money to pay for an iPod, for example. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you. Mr. Penny, your suggestion that the legislation potentially could go further,
Right.
To fund local training programs, city, county parks. I'm assuming you would include state parks in that
Right.
in that example. What role do you envision then for the federal government in this more collaborative effort that you're suggesting?
Well, thank you for the question, and yes, I do. What we've found is that one of the great things about young people in urban centers is that they are more drawn to conserve their own land than they are to go onto federal lands, and I think if all of the bureaus, all of the agencies are going to help diversify their workforce and represent and be friendly to diverse populations, we need to find some way to extend the reach beyond the park boundaries and into communities. So what we see is collaborating with organizations like SCA, the various conservation corps, and seeking matching funds, and having if the federal government could help provide training programs for young people once they've gone through a certain level of program in their local community. If the Park Service, for instance, would then provide those students with a secondary experience on the federal lands that help them qualify for preferential hiring, then I think we could more readily attract more diverse young people into the federal lands and public lands.
I've completely gone way over the time because I've been trying to, before they call us to vote again, but in going way over time, I've been neglectful of my two colleagues that are here as well. One more question. Ms. Jewell, you talked about the need for experienced folk to be part of the Corps.
Correct.
And how do you envision this process? Is that a training capacity, mentoring capacity, or participant capacity?
Well, it could be all of the above, but I was thinking of it in terms of a participant capacity, and I'll give you some great examples. REI's oldest employee is 92. Our youngest employee is 16. Our 92-year-old employee works on the sales floor in Reno, Nevada, and there isn't a service project that store does out in the community that Mountain Bob, our 92-year-old, isn't a part of. I think what we've found, and this is true when we work outdoors with, for example, Earth Corps or the Washington Trails Association, you frequently have experienced Americans working alongside young people, and the richness of exchange is amazing. So I would say it's at a participant capacity, but you also have skills that have been learned over a lifetime that can be applied, and so it could also be in training, and we see that at both ends.
And I'll follow up on another question. Would like to get it in writing for the committee, having to do with the issue of flexibility in a schedule, because I try to accommodate both participant experienced folk as part of the Corps. And I'm glad. I think that age mixture is good, and when Dr. Hendricks retires, there will be a place for him in the Corps. Let me now turn to Ms. Burdell for any questions. Thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity. I want to thank all the witnesses here. I was very interested in listening to your statements, and I especially enjoyed hearing the testimonies of Marcus and James. You know, when you think about it, programs like these can make such a difference in your life. I speak to students about careers on many occasions, and I always say what you have in mind may not be in your earlier years what you really are going to end up doing. It may even have something to do with someone you married. I married a politician, so that's why I'm here today. But I truly appreciate, you know, all of the volunteers and what they're doing in this program. And Mr. Chairman, I applaud you for sponsoring this bill. I want to ask the young men first, what do we need to have in this program to make it as attractive as possible to the young people? How do we go about doing outreach? Advertising, or, I mean, are we doing enough? So I'll begin with you, Marcus.
Sure. Thank you. I think that one great way to reach young people is to provide an incentive. And a lot of young people are interested in being independent. And one way that they can be independent is to have their own source of money. Now, I also think that a lot of people are interested in working in public lands for the betterment of their community, in order to improve the lands as they are, or the lands, or to create a sense of community responsibility to take care of the national environment that they live in. And I think there's a lot more that you can do than to just give students money. You can also, in terms of advertising, reach out to a lot of high school students, because high school students are looking forward to going to college, and they also have to face that decision, what are they going to do with the next 40, 50, 60 years of their life? And if you start marketing to them when they're in their sophomore or junior year, when they're making their decisions about where they want to go to college and what they want to do, then that's when you can.
So perhaps this legislation should address that, Mr. Chairman, as well as to do a little more marketing for this program, so that, you know, now these students, their siblings know about it, but how do we outreach to the rest? James, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, just like Marcus said, the same thing. I have a brother that's about to graduate high school, and so by me being in this, he's wanting to do the same thing, to be independent to himself and make sure he's going on the right path like I am. So by advertising this out to younger students, especially from their sophomore year, if we get to them now, there's a better chance that they'll probably change their whole career outlook in the rest of their life.
Thank you, thank you. Now I have a question for Mr. Penny. H.R. 1612 would amend the Public Land Corps Act to allow the United States Fish and Wildlife Service to participate as an eligible bureau under the Public Lands Corps Act. Now, I believe this is a very excellent idea. As you may be aware, 2 other separate laws facilitate the contributions of volunteers at our national wildlife refuges and at our national fish hatcheries. And through these 2 laws, one is the National Wildlife Refuge System Volunteer and Community Partnership Act, and the other is the National Fish Hatchery Systems Volunteer Act. Now, the Fish and Wildlife Service has established nearly 190 friend organizations through these programs. The service also has received thousands of hours of invaluable volunteer labor and in-kind services, which have helped alleviate cutbacks in federal staff levels at our refuges and hatcheries. My questions are, has your organization ever provided any volunteers to support operations at our national wildlife refuges or the national fish hatcheries? And if not, is there some impediment preventing it? And the second part of the question is, do you anticipate that the passage of H.R. 1612 will make it easier for your organization to place volunteers within the refuge and hatchery systems?
Well, thank you for the question, and the response is yes, we have worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service on numerous occasions for many years. SCA has had a cooperative agreement with Fish and Wildlife Service for about the last 30 years. So the only thing that keeps us from doing more of it is money and the authority for them to work more closely with us and other youth-serving organizations. I think it's an absolutely fabulous inclusion to have the Fish and Wildlife Service as a part of this. I might also say that also having NOAA and Commerce involved with this is really important. What we do know is that increasing numbers of young people, particularly college students, are very interested in serving on our shorelands and marine sanctuaries and marine lands. And so the more we can do with both Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA, the more opportunities and more young people will be involved, will be interested in being involved. So I think that's an excellent inclusion.
Very good, and I do agree. One last question, Mr. Chairman.
Ma'am, may I just respond to the question you asked
Yes.
Marcus and James? I would say the best way to recruit more young people into working on public lands is to get young people out talking to them. And I would say the best way to do that is to work with cooperating organizations like SCA, like the various corps, and get their members visiting schools and sharing their experience. It's not those of us with gray hair that recruit them, or even a green and gray uniform with the Park Service. It's somebody that shares their experience and their age.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. One last question is, and this could be Ms. Proti or Mr. Penny, do your organizations have any programs on Guam or in any of the other insular areas? And if not, what can we do to get SCA and Corps volunteers in the Guam National Wildlife Refuge?
Well, I can respond. We have had, on occasion, we have had some interns, college interns, serving in Guam, and also in the Virgin Islands.
Virgin Islands.
We certainly work with the parks in the Virgin Islands there. So, and we'd like to do more.
Good. Well, I would certainly like to invite you to do more.
And we would like to work with you to do more, and we have not.
Good.
to my
And I've been
knowledge.
assured by the chairman that the territories are included in this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for those suggestions, Bordeaux. I think the issue of outreach and how it's done and the importance of that is important, and the insular areas and territories to be included in the overall scope of the legislation is vital and necessary and fair, and thank you for both of those. Mr. Inslee.
Thank you, and particular thanks to Dale Penny and Sally Prouty for your helps with developing our Clean Energy Corps, which is a somewhat allied effort, and we really appreciate it. We think we have a good product, and we'll have a suite of these opportunities for young people now, so whatever their vision is, they can take advantage of it. I want to ask Sally Jewell and welcome her as a leader in our community in Washington State. And she's been a very successful business leader in a variety of contexts. And I just wonder, Sally, if you can give us any thoughts about, if you were looking at this from a business perspective, do you have any suggestions on how to operate these particular endeavors? Do you have any suggestions, any criticisms? You certainly know how to run an operation, so if you have any thoughts, I'd solicit them.
Thanks, Congressman. I have a lot of suggestions, and I'll make them brief. REI engages with lots of nonprofit organizations. We are very, very committed to supporting our public lands. SCA, many of the members of the Corps Network are organizations that we work closely with, and I would say that while they are very committed to their work, they are always short of money. It's not uncommon for them to run into bureaucracy when they work on public lands. And I think one of the things that could be facilitated to help move these things forward is a clear commitment on the part of the public agencies, from all the ones that have been mentioned, certainly national parks, but U.S. Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, NOAA, and so on, to really help create a supportive infrastructure to bring in organizations that are very, very effective engaging young people and older people in service, as well as volunteers. So I think that you end up with national park superintendents and national forest supervisors who are really supportive in some cases, and in other cases it's more difficult to bring the volunteer resources to bear, I think sometimes because of the challenges they face within their own agencies.
So we might think, this may be a little controversial, but we might want to think about specific appropriations or allocations for volunteer infrastructure. You know, to get volunteers in, you have to have the personnel to organize, supervise, recruit. Maybe that's something we can think about more in the appropriation side of this. Let me ask you, my son works for a group called Outdoors for All. They take people with challenges skiing, quadriplegics and blind people skiing and kayaking, and it's a pretty amazing group. Would this bill allow folks to essentially be detailed to organizations like that, or at least work arm in arm with them? How flexible would this allow these corps to be? That's an open question to anyone. I see Dale Penny shaking his head. Do you have any thoughts about that, Dale?
Sure. I think we would like to be able to include groups like that for appropriate level of work to be done. And I think you'd have to be very clear about where they could work and what is appropriate from a risk management point of view. But I think it should be open to all of those groups.
Yeah, I was thinking actually more the question of the relationship between these these core members with nonprofits. In other words, can you actually sort of lend out a person on this core to a nonprofit organization like this for a week or a month or under their supervision?
Sure.
Is that workable? Does the statute as we've drafted it here allow sufficient flexibility in that regard?
Actually, thank you for the question, and thank you for your leadership on the Clean Energy Service Corps. We owe you big time. We appreciate you. If the money from the bill is, in fact, as I understand it, for projects, and if the cooperative agreement with the Corps is to complete a particular project or series of projects, then the Corps would have to be focused on those projects. So it sounds to me like the line of reasoning that you are engaged in might not fit, or we might need to think about that. Both Dale and I have Corps around the country who have individual placements of members doing particular work, but it's different from what we would normally see in a public lands Corps, project-funded Corps.
Well, I might actually ask to staff to help me look at that issue, because I think it is a force multiplier when we can get these groups working. Sally, did you have another thought?
Well, I'm just going to make a comment. I think that the legislation, the GIVE Act and the Public Service Acts that passed recently accommodate some of what you're discussing. And what this is specifically looking at is really around public lands, which weren't explicitly called out in the earlier legislation. So I do think that there is a benefit of focus that Chairman Grijalva has put into this legislation around public lands because the need is so great. I think if you go back to the testimony of Will Shafroth a little bit earlier, he talked about the opportunity not just, say, in a national park, but all the way down to city parks and public lands. It's a great way to engage people in public service close to where they live. And in my conversation with James, as we were waiting for the session to start, a lot of his work, he stays at home and he goes to the site during the day and then he comes back. And I think that's really addresses these kinds of opportunities in service learning close to home, as well as more remote destinations like SCA does. I think that the GIVE Act and the equivalent act in the other body do help address what you're talking about. That's my understanding.
I appreciate it. Mr. Reynolds?
May I return to a comment that Sally Jewell made about the bureaucratic hurdles to be overcome to get through some of these things? As an example, the Fish and Wildlife Service in its creation of a new agreement with the SCA took less than 6 months. It went very quickly. It was very easy. As a counterpoint, and the Fish and Wildlife Service has specific legislation that allows for cooperative agreements, so it doesn't have to have the same interpretations of solicitors and contracting officers that the Park Service is faced with, because it doesn't have the similar legislation. The Park Service agreement, which should be done in about a month, has been going on for 2 years, 11 months, and it's still counting to get this agreement. And the reason that I made the recommendation in my testimony about legislation was to eliminate that kind of bottleneck for all of the agencies. And it's not because the agencies don't want to make things happen. It's because the advisors to the agencies in contracting and attorneys have different interpretations of law. And if we want this act and other cooperative acts to get youth in the parks and the other public lands to work efficiently, these authorities need to be addressed.
Well, I know many would seek to outlaw attorneys in this country, but I do not favor that approach. Hopefully, being one and being proudly a lawyer, I won't favor that issue.
Fish and Wildlife Service has an excellent approach and authorities.
I appreciate that. Just, I really want to thank Mr. Hendricks and Mr. Childers for being here. You guys are exactly what we had in mind, and it's just wonderful to see your futures developing. I want to give you a warning, though. I know a couple guys who are involved in SCA and doing this kind of work. One of them ended up a very wealthy investment banker, and one ended up a congressman. So you got to be careful when you get into these things. I'm giving you warnings about that. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hensley. Mr. Holt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I commend you and Mr. Rahal for pursuing this legislation. I'm pleased to have worked to get national parks included in the recent volunteer service legislation. All of you have spoken about how much the potential is. In fact, Sally Prouty specifically says potential exists in today's young people. I'd like to look from the other side what the potential is. Sally Jewell, I know, heard the Secretary of the Interior say just last night that he would like to greatly increase the volunteer opportunities in the parks. I wanted to get some idea of kind of what's the upper limit? What could the system absorb? How large scale might we go to? Perhaps you've covered this already in today's hearing, but I think it's an important enough question it wouldn't hurt covering it again.
Well, let me take a stab at it, and I'm sure Sally Prouty and Dale perhaps would have things to add as well. In the hundreds of organizations that REI work
If I may,
with,
just,
yes.
and not to interrupt, but, well, yeah, I guess it is.
You're the chairman.
We've been called to a vote. We've got about 5-6 minutes, so as we wrap up, I'm just urging you to be as succinct as you can.
Yeah, I mean, if you can just give us your estimate in a sentence or two, why?
Well, I would say that the potential is hundreds of thousands, and I'll say why, and that is because right now many programs are being cut, and there is the infrastructure and the people and the organizations ready to step forward, but they don't have funding right now to be able to do it. So I think it could be enlarged dramatically.
Go ahead. And I would say that we have recently been in communication when working with Department of Interior, and we've given them basic information around a 200,000 number. So those discussions would be continuing, obviously, and they're not hard and fast, but that's the number we're thinking.
I would agree with both. The capacity of all of the organizations collectively together is huge if the money is there to support the buildup of that capacity. And the young people are there, and I think that's important too.
Thank you. I wish we could continue the discussion. Again, I commend the chair for pursuing this legislation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunt. Let me thank all of you, panelists, for being here. Informative, some very good suggestions that we will work with you on to follow up in terms of the legislation. It's a vehicle, and a vehicle to promote not only the three things that I asked a question about: intervention in one area, human resource development in another, and our public lands. And that's the intent of the legislation, to try to accomplish those three, as some of the fine organizations that are here have been doing for a long time. We look forward to moving this legislation ahead, and with the input of my colleagues, as well as from you, I think we'll have a good vehicle for accomplishing those three goals. So thank you very much, very informative and a good hearing. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.